Episode 84, the Ancestral Blueprint for Peak Performance. Welcome to the Peak Performance Podcast. I'm Brad Young, and today we're diving deep into something that's been transforming how I think about human potential, the ancestral approach to peak performance. We're going to explore how our prehistoric ancestors didn't just survive, they thrived in conditions that would break most modern humans. And here's the thing, their blueprint for success is still coded into your DNA, waiting to be activated. For the past few months, I've been obsessed with this question. What if everything we think we know about peak performance is backwards? What if instead of fighting against our biology with extreme diets, punishing workout routines, and constant optimization hacks, we actually worked with the fundamental programming that's been refined over hundreds of thousands of years? Today's episode is about understanding that programming. We're going to look at how prehistoric cultures approached physical performance, how your unique genetic makeup and body type determine your optimal path forward, and most importantly, how you can combine ancient wisdom with modern advantages to unlock capabilities you didn't know you had. This isn't about going back to living in caves or abandoning modern science. It's about recognizing that we are, biologically speaking, still those prehistoric humans. Our bodies haven't evolved to match our environment. Our environment has changed faster than we can adapt. And that mismatch is creating problems we can solve by understanding where we came from. The prehistoric performance paradox. Let me start with something that might surprise you. Our prehistoric ancestors were, in many measurable ways, more physically capable than the average person today. Skeletal remains show they had denser bones, stronger muscle attachments, and bodies built for incredible endurance. But here's what's fascinating. They weren't trying to be peak performers, they were just living. Think about that for a moment. They didn't have gym memberships, protein supplements, or morning routines. They didn't track their macros or worry about their VO2 max, yet they developed bodies and minds capable of extraordinary feats because their daily life demanded it. They walked miles every day searching for food. They carried heavy loads. They sprinted when necessary. They climbed, crawled, lifted, and moved in ways that challenged every muscle group naturally. The paradox is this: we have infinitely more resources, knowledge, and tools than they did, yet many of us struggle with basic fitness, chronic stress, and preventable diseases. We're working harder than ever to achieve what came naturally to them. Why? Because we've disconnected from the fundamental principles that shaped human performance for most of our history. Prehistoric cultures didn't compartmentalize fitness the way we do. Movement wasn't exercise, it was life. Nutrition wasn't a diet, it was whatever they could hunt, gather, or forage. Rest wasn't scheduled, it happened when darkness fell. Their bodies and minds adapted to their environment because survival demanded it. And this created a feedback loop of capability that we can learn from and apply to our modern lives. The goal isn't to recreate their exact lifestyle. That's neither possible nor necessary. The goal is to understand the biological principles that govern their performance and figure out how to trigger those same adaptive responses in our modern context. That's where real transformation happens. Understanding your genetic blueprint. Now, here's where it gets personal. Not everyone's ancestors lived the same way or faced the same challenges. Your genetic background matters enormously when it comes to determining your optimal performance strategy. And this is something modern fitness culture often gets wrong. It assumes one approach works for everyone. Your ancestors adapted to specific environments, climates, and food sources over thousands of generations. If your genetic background traces to Northern Europe, your body likely evolved mechanisms for surviving long, cold winters with limited food availability. If your heritage is from equatorial regions, your physiology adapted to heat, humidity, and different nutritional patterns. These adaptations don't disappear in a few generations. They're still influencing how your body responds to food, exercise, stress, and environmental factors today. This is why some people thrive on higher fat diets, while others do better with more carbohydrates. It's why some people are naturally lean and others store fat more easily. It's why some people recover quickly from intense exercise while others need more rest. Understanding your genetic tendencies isn't about making excuses, it's about working with your biology instead of against it. The concept of body types or somatotypes has been around since the 1940s, but it's often misunderstood or dismissed. In reality, your body type is a reflection of your genetic predispositions and how they interact with your environment. Ectomorphs, mesomorphs, and endomorphs aren't rigid categories. They're tendencies that reflect different ancestral adaptations. And understanding where you fall on this spectrum gives you crucial information about how to train, eat, and recover optimally. An ectomorph, typically lean with difficulty building muscle, might have ancestors from environments where food scarcity was common and mobility was essential. Their metabolism runs hot and their bodies resist storing excess weight. A mesomorph, naturally muscular and athletic, might have genetic programming from ancestors who needed explosive power and strength. An endomorph, who stores fat more easily but often has great strength potential, might carry genes that were advantageous during unpredictable food availability where efficient energy storage meant survival. None of these is better or worse. They're just different strategies that evolution tested and kept. Your job is to figure out which tendencies you have and build your performance approach around them, not fight against them. The body fat paradox, why we store it and how to lose it. Let's talk about something that frustrates almost everyone at some point: body fat. Understanding why we store it is the first step to managing it effectively. And once again, the answer lies in our prehistoric past. Body fat isn't a mistake or a flaw in human design, it's one of our species' greatest survival advantages. Fat is incredibly energy dense, storing about 3,500 calories per pound. For our ancestors who never knew when their next meal would come, the ability to store excess energy as fat was literally life saving. During times of abundance, storing fat meant you could survive weeks or even months of scarcity. People who couldn't store fat efficiently simply didn't survive to pass on their genes. Here's the problem: we're living with Stone Age bodies in a space age world. Your body still thinks famine is always just around the corner because that was true for 99.9% of human history. But now we live in an environment of constant food availability, and not just any food, but hyper palatable, calorie dense foods engineered to override our natural satiety signals. Your body's fat storage mechanisms are working exactly as designed. It's just that the environment has changed completely. Understanding this changes everything about how you approach fat loss. Your body doesn't want to lose fat, it wants to keep it as insurance against starvation. Every diet triggers physiological responses designed to prevent fat loss, increased hunger hormones, decreased metabolic rate, reduced spontaneous movement, and even changes in how you perceive food. This isn't a personal failure, it's your prehistoric programming doing exactly what it evolved to do. So, how do you lose fat in this context? Not by fighting harder against your biology, but by working with it. This means creating conditions where your body feels safe enough to release stored energy. It means eating in a way that provides consistent nutrition signals rather than triggering famine response mechanisms. It means incorporating movement patterns that your genes recognize as normal rather than emergency situations requiring energy conservation. And it means being patient with a process that your body is biologically programmed to resist. The most effective fat loss approach mimics prehistoric patterns: periods of normal eating interspersed with modest calorie restriction, plenty of low intensity movement, strategic higher intensity efforts, adequate protein to preserve muscle, and crucially, sufficient recovery. This pattern signals safety while creating the calorie deficit needed for fat loss. It's not quick, but it's sustainable because it works with your biology instead of against it. The movement patterns that built humanity. If you want to understand how to move for optimal performance, look at how prehistoric humans moved. Not because we should copy them exactly, but because those movement patterns shaped our musculoskeletal system, cardiovascular capacity, and metabolic efficiency. Prehistoric humans were masters of varied movement. They walked constantly. Studies suggest our ancestors walked anywhere from 8 to 12 miles per day on average. Not marathon running, not high intensity interval training, just steady, consistent walking over varied terrain. This created powerful cardiovascular foundations and developed incredible endurance capacity without the joint damage and stress that chronic intense exercise creates. But they also sprinted when needed, running from predators or chasing game. These were brief, maximum effort explosions of speed and power, followed by long recovery periods. Sound familiar? It should. This is essentially the template for high intensity interval training, except they did it occasionally and naturally, not as a structured workout program 5 days a week. They lifted and carried heavy things regularly: children, tools, gathered food, building materials, hunted game. This developed functional strength in natural movement patterns: carrying, dragging, pushing, pulling, lifting from the ground. They didn't isolate muscle groups or worry about symmetry. They just moved loads in ways that life required, and their bodies responded by building practical, usable strength. They climbed, crawled, balanced, and moved through three-dimensional space constantly: trees, rocks, uneven ground. Their environment demanded constant adaptation and full body coordination. This created incredible mobility, stability, and body control without dedicated flexibility work or balance training. What can we learn from this? That the human body thrives on varied movement at different intensities. The foundation should be lots of low intensity movement. Walking is perfect. Layer in regular lifting and carrying of moderately heavy things using natural patterns. Add occasional brief, intense efforts that challenge your maximum capacity. Include playful movement that requires coordination and adaptability. And crucially, do all of this with adequate recovery between challenging sessions. And this is completely contrary to how most people approach fitness today. We sit for 23 hours, then do 1 hour of punishing exercise, then wonder why we're injured, exhausted, or not seeing results. Prehistoric movement patterns work because they match what our bodies evolved to do. Modern exercise programs often fail because they ask our bodies to do things they weren't designed for in patterns that don't make biological sense. Nutrition. What prehistoric eating actually looked like. There's enormous confusion about what prehistoric humans actually ate, and this confusion has spawned countless diet trends claiming to recreate ancestral eating patterns. Let me clear up some misconceptions and then explain what we can actually learn from prehistoric nutrition. First, there was no single prehistoric diet. Humans lived in incredibly diverse environments, from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests, from coastal areas to inland plains. What people ate depended entirely on what was available in their specific location and season. Some groups ate mostly meat and fish. Others relied heavily on tubers, nuts, and gathered plant foods. Many ate everything they could find. The idea that there's one paleo diet that we should all follow is historically inaccurate. However, there are some universal principles that applied across all prehistoric eating patterns, and these principles are incredibly valuable for modern performance and health. First, everything they ate was whole, unprocessed food. There were no refined grains, no added sugars, no seed oils, no artificial ingredients. Their food was meat, fish, eggs, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, and roots, period. The nutrient density of their diet was extraordinarily high compared to the modern Western diet. Second, they ate irregularly. The idea of 3 meals a day plus snacks is completely modern. Prehistoric humans ate when food was available, which might mean a large meal after a successful hunt, followed by a day or two of lighter eating. This intermittent pattern created metabolic flexibility, the ability to efficiently use both stored fat and incoming food for energy. Modern humans often lose this flexibility because we eat constantly, keeping insulin elevated and fat storage mechanisms active all the time. Third, they ate seasonally and locally. Summer might bring abundant fruit and berries. Fall brought nuts and game, preparing for winter. Winter meant stored foods and whatever could be hunted. Spring brought new plant growth and eggs. This created natural variation in macronutrient ratios throughout the year, which likely had beneficial effects on metabolism and body composition that we're only beginning to understand. Fourth, they had to work for their food. The effort required to hunt, gather fish, or forage meant that eating was connected to significant physical activity. This created a natural balance between energy intake and expenditure that's completely absent when food is available at every convenience store and restaurant. What does this mean for you today? Not that you need to hunt your own food or fast for days. It means prioritizing whole, nutrient dense foods that your body recognizes and knows how to process. It means considering periods of lower calorie intake rather than constant eating. It means eating different types of foods in different seasons if possible. And it means staying active enough that your body uses the food you eat rather than storing it all as fat. Sleep and recovery, the prehistoric pattern. One of the most overlooked aspects of peak performance is recovery. And once again, prehistoric patterns offer profound insights. Our ancestors didn't set alarms, track sleep cycles, or worry about sleep optimization, but they almost certainly slept better than most modern people do. The prehistoric sleep pattern was simple. When darkness fell, activity decreased and sleep began. When light returned, people woke. This wasn't rigid. They didn't have clocks, but it was consistent with natural light dark cycles. During summer, they slept less. During winter, they slept more. This natural variation in sleep duration based on daylight hours kept their circadian rhythm strongly synchronized with their environment. Research on modern hunter gatherer groups shows they typically sleep 7 to 8 hours at night, but sleep quality is often excellent because their entire day has been spent outdoors, exposed to natural light, with significant physical activity and minimal artificial light exposure after dark. They also tend to rest during the hottest part of the day in tropical environments, a natural siesta pattern that many modern cultures have abandoned. The lesson here isn't just about sleep duration, it's about creating conditions that support high quality sleep and recovery. This means getting bright light exposure early in the day to set your circadian rhythm properly. It means being physically active during the day so your body has reason to recover. It means avoiding bright artificial light, especially blue light from screens in the evening so melatonin production isn't suppressed. And it means having a consistent sleep wake schedule that aligns reasonably well with natural light cycles. But recovery isn't just about sleep. Prehistoric humans also had built in recovery patterns in their activity levels. Hunting and gathering weren't constant maximum efforts. There were naturally easier days and harder days based on food availability and weather conditions. Modern life often doesn't allow for this natural variation, which is why deliberately programming recovery days into your training is essential. Your body still needs the rhythm of effort and recovery that shaped human performance for millennia. Active recovery was also built into prehistoric life. On easier days, people still walked, moved, performed light tasks. They didn't sit completely still. This low intensity movement promotes blood flow, facilitates waste removal from tissues, and maintains metabolic activity without creating additional stress. Modern rest days often mean complete inactivity, which isn't optimal for recovery. Light movement, stretching, easy walking, these prehistoric recovery patterns still work perfectly today. The stress response, designed for acute, not chronic. Understanding how prehistoric humans dealt with stress is absolutely crucial for managing modern stress and maintaining peak performance. This might be one of the biggest mismatches between our biology and our current environment. The stress response system, the sympathetic nervous system, cortisol release, adrenaline surge, evolved to handle acute physical threats. A predator appears. Your stress system activates immediately, flooding your body with energy and focus for fight or flight, and then, crucially, the threat ends. Either you escaped, or you fought successfully, or unfortunately, you didn't survive. But for survivors, the stressor was resolved, the stress response shut down, and the body returned to rest and digest mode. This system works brilliantly for short term physical threats. Your heart rate spikes, blood moves to your muscles, digestion shuts down, immune function is temporarily suppressed, and all your resources focus on surviving the immediate danger. These changes are adaptive and helpful when they're temporary. The problem is that modern stressors don't end. Work stress, financial pressure, relationship conflicts, information overload, social media anxiety. These stressors are psychological rather than physical. and they persist for hours, days, weeks, or even years. Your body can't tell the difference between a tiger chasing you and a stressful email from your boss. It activates the same stress response. But while the tiger situation ends in minutes, the email stress might persist all day, triggering chronic activation of systems designed for brief emergencies only. Chronic cortisol elevation, persistent sympathetic nervous system activation, ongoing suppression of digestion and immune function. These adaptations that save your life during acute stress become destructive when they never shut off. The result is the chronic stress epidemic we see today. Anxiety, insomnia, digestive problems, weakened immunity, difficulty losing fat despite diet and exercise, mental fog, and decreased performance. Your stress response system is working exactly as designed. The problem is it's being activated inappropriately and chronically. So, what's the solution? We need to create conditions that allow our stress response to function as it evolved to acute activation followed by complete recovery. This means several things. First, we need to physically discharge stress through movement. Remember, the stress response is designed for physical action. When you're stressed, move intensely for a brief period, then rest. This mimics the prehistoric pattern and allows the stress cycle to complete. Second, we need to actively trigger the parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system to counterbalance stress activation. Prehistoric humans did this naturally through darkness, rest, and safety. We can do it through practices like deep breathing, meditation, time in nature, and genuine relaxation. Third, we need to limit chronic stressors where possible and change our psychological relationship with unavoidable ones. Your body will keep responding to perceived threats. You have to change what you perceive as threatening. Mental clarity, the prehistoric mind body connection. Peak performance isn't just physical. Mental clarity, focus, and cognitive performance are equally important. And once again, prehistoric patterns offer valuable insights into optimizing brain function. Prehistoric humans needed sharp minds to survive. They had to remember locations of food sources across vast territories, track animal movements, predict weather patterns, understand complex social dynamics, craft tools, solve problems creatively, and make life or death decisions quickly. Their brains were every bit as capable as ours, they just used them differently. What's fascinating is that many of their lifestyle factors supported optimal brain function naturally. High physical activity increases blood flow to the brain and stimulates production of brain derived neurotrophic factor, which supports neural growth and protection. Time outdoors exposes you to natural light patterns that regulate circadian rhythms, which directly impact cognitive performance. The cognitive demands of navigating varied terrain, coordinating complex physical tasks, and solving practical problems kept their minds engaged in ways that supported neuroplasticity. Their diet also supported brain function exceptionally well. Omega-3 fatty acids from fish and wild game, abundant micronutrients from organ meats and wild plants, adequate protein for neurotransmitter production. These provided the building blocks for optimal neural function. They weren't eating processed foods that spike and crash blood sugar, triggering brain fog and energy fluctuations. Their whole food diet kept blood sugar relatively stable, providing consistent fuel for cognitive performance. Interestingly, prehistoric humans also experienced periods of ketosis during food scarcity. When you haven't eaten for a while, your liver begins producing ketone bodies from fat as an alternative fuel source for the brain. Many people report enhanced mental clarity during fasting or ketogenic states, which makes evolutionary sense. Heightened cognitive function during food scarcity would improve hunting and gathering success, increasing survival odds. Your brain evolved to run efficiently on both glucose and ketones, giving you metabolic flexibility that most modern people have lost through constant carbohydrate consumption. The lesson for modern peak performers is that cognitive performance is deeply connected to physical lifestyle factors. If you want mental clarity and focus, you can't just do brain training exercises. You need to create the physical conditions that support optimal brain function. That means regular physical activity, time outdoors, whole food nutrition with adequate healthy fats and micronutrients, stable blood sugar, good sleep, and periods without constant eating. These aren't separate from cognitive performance. They are cognitive performance strategies. Additionally, prehistoric humans weren't constantly bombarded with information and decision demands the way we are. They had natural periods of low cognitive demand, walking, performing routine tasks, resting. These periods allowed their minds to process, consolidate memories, and recover. Modern life often lacks these cognitive rest periods, keeping us in a state of constant mental activation. Deliberately creating time for mental rest, walks without podcasts, time without screens, periods of low stimulation may be one of the most important performance strategies you can implement. Determining your body type, the genetic categories. Now let's get practical about how you can determine your body type and what that means for your personalized performance approach. Remember, these categories aren't rigid boxes. Most people are combinations, but understanding your tendencies is incredibly valuable. Ectomorphs typically have narrow shoulders and hips, long limbs relative to torso length, and difficulty building muscle mass. If you're naturally lean, struggle to gain weight even when trying. Have a fast metabolism and can eat relatively large amounts without gaining fat, you likely have strong ectomorphic tendencies. From an ancestral perspective, this body type may reflect genetic programming from environments where mobility was crucial and food was scarce. Your ancestors survived by being efficient movers who didn't need to carry excess weight. For ectomorphs, the key is eating enough. Your high metabolism means you need more calories than you think to build muscle or maintain weight. Focus on calorie dense whole foods, eat frequently, and don't be afraid of healthy fats and starches. Your training should emphasize strength and muscle building with adequate recovery. You don't need extra cardio or metabolic conditioning. You need to lift heavy, eat plenty, and rest enough for your body to build tissue. Think power and strength rather than endurance. Mesomorphs typically have broad shoulders, narrow waist, muscular build, even without training, and respond quickly to exercise. If you build muscle relatively easily, have an athletic appearance naturally, and can change your body composition fairly quickly through training and diet, you're likely predominantly mesomorphic. This body type may reflect ancestors who needed explosive power and physical capability for hunting and defense. Mesomorphs are often the easy gainers in fitness, responding well to most training approaches. Your advantage is versatility. You can build muscle, lose fat, or improve athletic performance relatively efficiently. The key is not wasting your genetic advantages through poor programming or inconsistency. Focus on progressive overload in your training. Eat to support your activity level and don't fall into the trap of thinking you can get away with poor habits just because you respond well initially. Your body type gives you a head start, but you still need to respect recovery and nutrition principles. Endomorphs typically have wider hips and shoulders, shorter limbs relative to torso, rounder appearance, and store fat easily. If you gain weight, easily have difficulty losing fat. Build muscle fairly easily, but it's often covered by fat, and have a slower metabolism. You likely have strong endomorphic tendencies. From an evolutionary perspective, this body type was extremely advantageous during unpredictable food availability. Efficient energy storage meant survival during famines. For endomorphs, the key is creating metabolic flexibility through strategic nutrition timing and types. You likely handle carbohydrates less efficiently than other body types, so focusing on protein and healthy fats with strategic carbohydrate intake around training may work better than high carb approaches. You'll need to be more precise with calorie management for fat loss, but you have great potential for building strength. Your training should include both strength work and enough movement to keep metabolism elevated. The metabolic conditioning that ectomorphs don't need, you may benefit from significantly. Tailoring your training to your genetics. Understanding your body type is just the beginning. Now you need to apply that knowledge to create a training approach that works with your genetic tendencies rather than against them. This is where individualization becomes crucial for peak performance. And if you're predominantly ectomorphic, your training needs to respect your recovery limitations and metabolism. Your body doesn't want to build muscle, it wants to stay light and mobile. To override this tendency, you need to provide a powerful stimulus with adequate recovery and nutrition. This means focusing on heavy compound lifts, squats, deadlifts, presses, rows with relatively lower volume. Think 3 to 4 working sets per exercise, lifting in the 4 to 8 rep range where you're generating maximum tension and training each muscle group twice per week at most. Ectomorphs often make the mistake of doing too much. You don't need 5-day-a-week bodybuilding splits or extensive metabolic conditioning. You need focused strength work followed by extensive rest and feeding. Your prehistoric advantage was efficiency of movement. Use that by training intensely but briefly, then recovering thoroughly. Aim for 3 to 4 training days per week, keep sessions under an hour, and prioritize sleep and nutrition above adding more training volume. If you're predominantly mesomorphic, you have the luxury of responding well to most training approaches, but this can actually become a disadvantage if you don't train intelligently. Your ability to handle and recover from training volume means you can benefit from higher frequency and more variation than other body types. Consider training 4 to 6 days per week with a mix of strength work, power development, and conditioning. The key for mesomorphs is progressive overload and periodization. Because you adapt quickly, you need to systematically increase training demands over time to keep progressing. This might mean cycling through strength phases, hypertrophy phases, and power phases throughout the year. Your prehistoric advantage was athletic versatility. You could sprint, lift, climb, fight. Train for this versatility by including varied movement patterns and physical demands rather than specializing too narrowly. And if you're predominantly endomorphic, your training needs to address both strength development and metabolic health. You have great potential for building muscle and strength, use it. But you also need enough activity volume to keep your metabolism elevated and insulin sensitivity high. This means combining heavy strength training with regular moderate intensity movement and strategic high intensity intervals. A good approach for endomorphs is lifting 3 to 4 days per week with a focus on compound movements and progressive overload, combined with daily walking and 2 to 3 sessions per week of metabolic conditioning, circuits, intervals, or complexes that elevate heart rate and burn calories while preserving muscle. Your prehistoric advantage was strength and resilience. You could carry heavy loads and sustain effort. Use training that honors these capabilities while managing your efficient energy storage through adequate activity volume. Nutrition strategies by body type. Just as training should be tailored to your genetic tendencies, so should nutrition. What works brilliantly for one body type may be completely wrong for another, which explains why there's so much conflicting diet advice. Let's break down ancestrally informed nutrition strategies for each predominant type. Ectomorphs need to eat more than they think. Your high metabolism and difficulty gaining weight means you require substantial calories to fuel performance and recovery. Focus on calorie-dense whole foods, fatty fish, whole eggs, avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil, coconut, starchy vegetables like potatoes and squash, rice, and plenty of fruit. Don't be afraid of carbohydrates. Your metabolism handles them well. And you need the energy. For ectomorphs, trying to build muscle or improve performance, meal frequency matters. Eating 3 large meals plus snacks ensures you're providing consistent nutrition signals and enough total calories. Consider adding a post-workout meal with both protein and carbohydrates to support recovery. Your prehistoric ancestors likely had metabolisms suited to environments where food was scattered and needed to be consumed when found. Eat accordingly, taking advantage of food availability rather than restricting intake. Mesomorphs have the most flexibility in nutrition approaches because their bodies are metabolically efficient at handling various macronutrient ratios. This is both an advantage and a trap. The advantage is that you can experiment to find what works best for your performance goals and preferences. The trap is that you might get complacent because you respond well initially to most approaches. For mesomorphs, focus on whole foods with balanced macronutrients, adequate protein for muscle maintenance and growth, enough healthy fats for hormonal health, and carbohydrates matched to your activity level. You can succeed with higher carb or lower carb approaches depending on your training demands and how you feel. The key is consistency and quality. Because you're responsive to both training and nutrition, small consistent improvements in food quality and timing will yield noticeable results. Use your genetic advantages by being strategic rather than random. Endomorphs need to be most precise with nutrition because of their efficient energy storage and typically lower insulin sensitivity. This doesn't mean you're doomed to struggle. It means you need to be more strategic. Focus on protein and healthy fats as your foundation, with carbohydrates earned through and timed around physical activity. A good approach for endomorphs is keeping carbohydrate intake moderate and strategically timed. Eating more carbs post workout when insulin sensitivity is highest, and keeping them lower at other times when they're more likely to be stored as fat. Emphasize vegetables for volume and micronutrients, lean proteins for satiety and muscle preservation, and healthy fats for hormonal health and satisfaction. Your prehistoric ancestors likely had genes optimized for surviving periods of scarcity through efficient fat storage. Respect this by creating an environment where fat storage is necessary because you're consistently active in strategically managing calorie intake. The hormone connection, prehistoric patterns in modern health. Understanding prehistoric lifestyle patterns becomes even more important when we consider hormonal health, which is fundamental to peak performance. Modern environments create hormonal disruptions that wouldn't have existed in prehistoric times, and these disruptions significantly impact body composition, energy, mood, and performance. Let's start with insulin, arguably the most important hormone for body composition. Insulin's job is to move nutrients from your bloodstream into your cells. When you eat, especially when you eat carbohydrates, blood sugar rises and insulin is released to clear that sugar. In prehistoric contexts, this system worked perfectly. Meals were irregular carbohydrates came from like whole food sources that were digested slowly, and physical activity used the stored energy efficiently. Insulin did its job and levels dropped back to baseline. Modern life creates chronic insulin elevation through constant eating, frequent carbohydrate intake from refined sources, and inadequate physical activity to use the stored energy. When insulin is constantly elevated, you can't effectively burn stored fat because insulin is a storage hormone. It tells your body to store energy, not release it. This creates a vicious cycle where you can't access your stored energy for fuel, so you feel hungry and tired. So you eat more, keeping insulin elevated. Breaking this cycle requires creating periods where insulin drops to baseline through spacing meals, reducing refined carbohydrates, and increasing physical activity. Cortisol, your primary stress hormone, follows a similar pattern. In prehistoric times, cortisol would spike during acute stress or physical exertion, then drop back to baseline during rest. Cortisol elevation mobilizes stored energy, sharpens focus, and suppresses non essential functions temporarily. This is adaptive for short term challenges. But chronic cortisol elevation from modern stress patterns leads to muscle breakdown, fat storage, especially around the midsection, disrupted sleep, suppressed immune function, and impaired recovery from exercise. Managing cortisol requires managing stress through prehistoric informed strategies. Adequate sleep aligned with natural light dark cycles. Regular physical activity that discharges stress energy. Time in nature, social connection, and practices that activate the parasympathetic rest and digest system like deep breathing, meditation, or gentle movement. You can't eliminate stress from modern life, but you can prevent chronic activation of stress responses through lifestyle design. Sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, are also profoundly influenced by lifestyle factors. Prehistoric humans maintained healthier hormone levels naturally through adequate sleep, whole food nutrition, appropriate body composition, and the right balance of physical stress and recovery. Modern factors like sleep deprivation, processed foods, environmental toxins, chronic stress, and either too much or too little exercise can significantly disrupt these hormones, impacting everything from muscle growth to mood to cognitive function. The path back to optimal hormonal function isn't medication or supplementation as a first approach. It's recreating the conditions that supported healthy hormone production for millennia. Sleep 7 to 9 hours consistently, eat whole foods with adequate healthy fats for hormone production, manage stress effectively, maintain appropriate body composition, and train hard but recover adequately. These ancestrally aligned practices optimize hormonal health naturally, creating the foundation for peak performance. The inflammation question: modern foods versus ancient bodies. One of the biggest disconnects between prehistoric biology and modern life is inflammation. Acute inflammation is a crucial healing response. When you cut yourself or strain a muscle, inflammation brings healing resources to the damaged area. This response evolved to handle the occasional injuries that were inevitable in prehistoric life. But chronic systemic inflammation from modern dietary and lifestyle factors is creating epidemic levels of disease and performance limitation. Prehistoric humans didn't eat foods that trigger chronic inflammation. They consumed wild game high in omega 3 fatty acids, fish, eggs, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. Foods that either reduce inflammation or maintain neutral inflammatory balance. Modern diets are often loaded with inflammatory triggers: refined seed oils high in omega 6 fatty acids, excess added sugars, processed grains, artificial additives, and foods many people are sensitive to but continue eating because they're convenient or habitual. The omega 6 to omega 3 ratio is particularly important. Wild game and fish provided abundant omega 3s with modest omega 6s, maintaining an anti inflammatory balance. Modern diets can have omega 6 to omega 3 ratios of 20 to 1 or higher, creating a pro inflammatory state. This chronic inflammation contributes to joint pain, slow recovery from exercise, brain fog, metabolic dysfunction, cardiovascular disease, and reduced performance across virtually every measurable parameter. Reducing inflammation requires reducing exposure to inflammatory triggers and increasing anti inflammatory factors. Practically, this means minimizing or eliminating refined seed oils found in processed foods and restaurant meals, reducing added sugar consumption, eating more fatty fish, or supplementing with high quality fish oil, eating plenty of colorful vegetables rich in anti inflammatory compounds, and identifying any food sensitivities you might have through elimination trials. Common inflammatory triggers that weren't in the prehistoric diet include gluten containing grains, dairy products, legumes, and certain nightshade vegetables. Not everyone reacts negatively to these foods, but many people do and don't realize it because they've always eaten them. A 30-day elimination of suspected triggers, followed by a systematic reintroduction, can reveal if specific foods are creating inflammation that's limiting your performance. Your prehistoric ancestors didn't eat these foods not because they were avoiding them, but because they literally didn't exist in their environments. Your body may not have the genetic programming to handle them well. Beyond diet, other lifestyle factors influence inflammation. Chronic stress, poor sleep, environmental toxins, sedentary behavior, and overtraining all increase systemic inflammation. The ancestral approach to managing inflammation isn't complicated. Eat whole foods your body evolved to handle. Move regularly but recover adequately. Sleep well, manage stress, and minimize exposure to modern inflammatory triggers. This simple framework can dramatically reduce the chronic inflammation that's holding back your performance. The gut brain performance connection. Recent research has revealed something our prehistoric ancestors demonstrated without understanding the mechanisms. Gut health is fundamental to overall performance, including cognitive function, mood, immune health, and physical capability. The gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your digestive system, influences virtually every aspect of human performance, and it's profoundly shaped by diet and lifestyle. Prehistoric humans maintained diverse, healthy gut microbiomes naturally through their varied whole food diets high in fiber and fermented foods. They ate dozens or even hundreds of different plant species throughout the year, providing fuel for diverse bacterial populations. They consumed fermented foods when preservation required it. They were exposed to dirt and microorganisms from their environment. This created robust, diverse gut ecosystems that supported optimal health. Modern humans often have devastated gut microbiomes. Antibiotic use, processed foods, lack of dietary diversity, chronic stress, environmental toxins, and limited exposure to beneficial microorganisms have created gut dysbiosis, an imbalance in gut bacteria that contributes to inflammation, weakened immunity, poor digestion, mood disorders, brain fog, and impaired nutrient absorption. If your gut isn't healthy, you can't perform at your peak no matter how well you train or how clean you eat. Rebuilding gut health requires several strategies. First, feed your beneficial gut bacteria through eating diverse plant foods high in fiber: vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, tubers. These provide prebiotics, the fuel that beneficial bacteria need to thrive. Second, consume fermented foods that contain beneficial bacteria: yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, or other traditional fermented foods. These provide probiotics, live beneficial bacteria that can colonize your gut. Third, avoid factors that damage gut health: unnecessary antibiotic use, chronic NSAID use, excessive alcohol, processed foods, artificial sweeteners, and chronic stress all disrupt healthy gut bacteria. Fourth, consider probiotic supplementation if you've had significant gut damage from antibiotics or other factors, though whole food sources are preferable when possible. The gut brain connection is particularly fascinating for peak performance. Your gut bacteria produce neurotransmitters, including about 90% of your body's serotonin. They influence inflammation throughout your body, including your brain. They affect nutrient absorption, energy production, and even gene expression. A healthy gut microbiome supports mental clarity, stable mood, efficient energy production, strong immunity, and optimal recovery from training. An unhealthy gut creates the opposite conditions. Prehistoric humans didn't think about gut health, they just lived in ways that supported it naturally. We need to be more intentional, but the principles are the same. Eat diverse whole foods, include fermented foods, avoid gut damaging factors, and create lifestyle conditions that support beneficial bacteria. This ancestral approach to gut health translates directly into enhanced modern performance. Social connection, the forgotten performance factor. Here's something most performance programs completely ignore. Prehistoric humans were intensely social creatures, and social connection was fundamental to survival and thriving. Modern research confirms that strong social connections are as important for health and longevity as exercise and nutrition. Yet many people pursuing peak performance treat social life as something to sacrifice for training and work. Prehistoric humans lived in small, tight-knit groups where everyone knew everyone else. They cooperated on hunting and gathering, shared food, raised children communally, told stories, sang, danced, and supported each other through challenges. This social fabric wasn't just pleasant, it was essential for survival. Isolated individuals didn't survive long. The group provided safety, knowledge transfer, emotional support, and practical assistance that no individual could replicate alone. Our brains and bodies evolved expecting this level of social connection. When we have it, we're healthier, more resilient to stress, mentally sharper, and even physically stronger. Studies show that people with strong social connections have lower inflammation, better immune function, faster recovery from illness, and significantly longer lifespans. Social isolation, conversely, increases stress hormones, inflammation, depression, cognitive decline, and mortality risk as much as smoking. For peak performers, this means social connection isn't optional or soft. It's a fundamental performance factor. If you're sacrificing relationships for training or work, you're undermining your performance foundation. If you're isolated or feel disconnected, you're operating with a significant biological disadvantage. Your body is literally stressed by lack of social connection because it evolved in environments where isolation meant danger. Building strong social connections doesn't require massive time investment or forced socializing. It requires quality relationships with people you trust and care about. Regular face-to-face interaction, not just digital communication, triggers beneficial neurological and hormonal responses. Shared activities, especially physical activities, strengthen bonds. Vulnerability and authentic communication deepen connections. These are the same elements that made prehistoric social groups functional. Training partners, workout groups, team sports, or fitness communities serve multiple purposes. They provide social connection, accountability, motivation, knowledge sharing, and healthy competition. These aren't just nice additions to your performance plan, they're leveraging the same group dynamics that helped prehistoric humans push beyond individual limitations. We evolved to perform better in groups, supporting and pushing each other. Lone wolf training ignores this powerful evolutionary advantage. The lesson is clear. Prioritize social connection as seriously as you prioritize training and nutrition. Maintain close relationships, spend quality time with people you care about, participate in group activities, and build community around your performance pursuits. This isn't sacrificing performance for social life, it's optimizing performance through social connection, exactly as our prehistoric biology expects. Environmental factors, nature, light, and circadian rhythms. Prehistoric humans lived entirely outdoors, intimately connected to natural cycles of light and darkness, weather patterns, and seasonal changes. This constant environmental exposure shaped biological rhythms that still govern performance today. Modern indoor lifestyles disconnect us from these environmental signals, creating subtle but significant performance limitations. Light exposure is perhaps the most important environmental factor for performance. Your circadian rhythm, your body's internal 24-hour clock, is primarily set by light exposure patterns. Prehistoric humans received intense bright light from sunrise onward, signaling daytime to their bodies. As darkness fell, the only light came from fire, which is relatively dim and doesn't disrupt melatonin production the way modern artificial light does. This pattern created strong circadian rhythms that optimize sleep, energy, hormone production, digestion, and virtually every physiological function. Modern humans often receive insufficient bright light during the day because we're indoors, then excessive bright light in the evening from screens and artificial lighting. This weakens circadian rhythms, disrupts sleep, reduces daytime energy and alertness, and impairs performance across multiple domains. The solution is deliberately recreating natural light exposure patterns. Get outside within an hour of waking, even on cloudy days. Morning light is crucial for setting your circadian clock properly. Spend time outdoors during the day when possible. In the evening, dim lights and minimize screen exposure, especially in the hour or two before sleep. If you must use screens, use blue light blocking glasses or apps. Sleep in complete darkness. These simple environmental modifications align your biology with patterns it evolved to expect, improving sleep quality, energy, focus, and recovery. Time in nature provides benefits beyond light exposure. Studies show that even brief periods in natural environments reduce stress hormones, lower blood pressure, improve mood, and enhance cognitive function. Forest bathing, the practice of spending time in forests, has been shown to boost immune function for days afterward. This makes evolutionary sense. Natural environments were home for prehistoric humans. Your body recognizes and responds positively to these environments because they signal safety and abundant resources. Temperature variation is another environmental factor worth considering. Prehistoric humans experienced temperature fluctuations daily and seasonally, hot days and cool nights, warm summers and cold winters. Modern climate control creates constant, comfortable temperatures, which reduces the beneficial stress that temperature variation provides. Deliberate exposure to cold through cold showers, ice baths, or winter outdoor activity and heat through saunas or hot environments creates adaptive stress that can improve metabolism, resilience, and recovery when done strategically. The ancestral approach to environmental factors is about reconnecting with natural rhythms and exposures that signal health and vitality to your biology. Spend time outdoors daily, get bright light in the morning and darkness at night, experience temperature variation occasionally, and minimize time in completely artificial environments. These environmental alignments create subtle but cumulative performance advantages. Fasting and feast, metabolic flexibility. One of the most powerful concepts from prehistoric eating patterns is metabolic flexibility, the ability to efficiently use both stored fat and incoming food for energy. Most modern humans have lost this flexibility through constant eating, creating dependency on regular meals and snacks to maintain energy and focus. Prehistoric humans didn't have consistent meal timing. Sometimes food was abundant and they ate large amounts. Other times, food was scarce and they ate little or nothing for extended periods. Their bodies had to function well in both states, which required metabolic flexibility. When food was available, they could efficiently use it for immediate energy and store excess as fat. When food wasn't available, they could smoothly transition to burning stored fat without significant performance decline. This flexibility provided survival advantages. Individuals who couldn't function without constant eating were at serious disadvantage during inevitable periods of scarcity. The ability to go hours or even days with reduced food intake while maintaining physical and mental performance was essential. Natural selection strongly favored metabolic flexibility, and the genetic programming for it still exists in your body. You just need to activate it. Modern eating patterns often destroy metabolic flexibility. Eating every few hours, especially carbohydrate rich meals and snacks, keeps insulin elevated and trains your body to rely exclusively on incoming glucose for energy. Your fat burning machinery essentially shuts down from disuse. This creates the situation where missing a meal causes energy crashes, mood swings, focus problems, and intense hunger. Your body can't efficiently access stored energy, so it demands incoming food. Rebuilding metabolic flexibility requires strategic periods without eating, allowing insulin to drop and fat burning pathways to activate. This doesn't mean extended fasting is necessary or optimal. It means creating reasonable periods between meals where your body learns to use stored energy efficiently. For many people, this might mean eating in an 8 to 10 hour window daily with 14 to 16 hours overnight and into the morning without food. For others, it might mean occasional longer fasts of 24 hours once or twice per week. The benefits of metabolic flexibility extend beyond just being able to skip meals comfortably. When your body can efficiently burn fat, you have access to vast energy stores. Even lean individuals carry tens of thousands of calories as stored fat versus only a few thousand calories as stored carbohydrate. Being able to tap into this massive energy reserve means stable energy throughout the day, easier fat loss when desired, improved mental clarity between meals, better appetite regulation, and enhanced endurance performance. Building metabolic flexibility takes time if you've been eating frequently for years. Start by gradually extending the time between dinner and breakfast, pushing breakfast later by 30 minutes every few days until you're comfortable with a 12 to 16-hour overnight fast. Once this feels natural, you can experiment with longer fasts occasionally. The key is that this should reduce hunger and improve energy over time, not create constant struggle. If you're miserable, you're pushing too hard. Metabolic flexibility should feel liberating, not restrictive. Movement variety, the prehistoric portfolio. And let's go deeper into movement patterns because this is where modern fitness often goes most wrong. Prehistoric humans had incredibly varied movement portfolios. Dozens of different movement patterns performed regularly in countless variations. Modern exercise programs often reduce movement to a handful of repeated patterns, and this limitation creates problems. Think about everything prehistoric humans did physically. They walked for hours over varied terrain, uphill, downhill, on uneven ground, through water, over obstacles. They ran occasionally at various speeds and distances. They climbed trees, rocks, and hillsides using hands and feet. They crawled through dense vegetation. They balanced on logs, rocks, and narrow paths. They jumped across gaps and onto elevated surfaces. They lifted and carried objects of different shapes, sizes, and weights, children tools, gathered foods, hunted game. They threw projectiles for hunting and defense. They pulled, pushed, dragged heavy objects. They dug, built, crafted tools. The variety was endless and constantly challenging their bodies in new ways. This movement variety created several advantages. First, it prevented overuse injuries by never repeating the exact same movement pattern excessively. Modern runners who run the same route repeatedly or lifters who do the same exercises develop overuse injuries because tissues never get varied stress patterns. Second, it created comprehensive physical development, strength, power, endurance, mobility, balance, coordination, all developed naturally through varied demands. Third, it kept movement engaging and mentally stimulating, preventing the boredom and burnout that plague many modern exercise programs. Modern peak performers can learn from this by deliberately building movement variety into their training. This doesn't mean random chaos, it means strategic variation. If you're a runner, vary your terrain, pace, and distance regularly. Include hills, trails, track work, and easy recovery runs. If you lift, vary your exercises, rep ranges, and movement patterns frequently. Include different squat variations, pressing patterns, pulling movements, and carries. Add in movement skills like crawling, climbing, balancing, jumping, throwing. Play is an underutilized but powerful training tool. Prehistoric children and adults engaged in playful movement, wrestling, dancing, games, climbing for fun rather than necessity. This playful movement developed physical capability without the psychological stress of formal training. Modern adults often abandon play completely, making all movement serious and goal oriented. This creates psychological fatigue that physical fatigue alone doesn't explain. Incorporating genuine play, sports, movement games, exploratory movement, dancing adds variation while reducing the psychological burden of constant structured training. The takeaway is that your body evolved for movement variety, not movement repetition. While some repetition is necessary for skill development and progressive overload, excessive repetition without variation leads to imbalances, injuries, and stagnation. Build a movement portfolio that includes strength, power, endurance, mobility, balance, and coordination work. Vary the specific patterns regularly. Include both structured training and playful movement. This ancestral approach to movement creates more complete physical development with lower injury risk and greater long term sustainability. The hydration and electrolyte balance. Prehistoric humans had to actively seek water and maintain hydration without modern conveniences. Understanding their relationship with hydration and electrolytes provides insights for optimal modern performance, especially since current hydration recommendations may not align perfectly with our evolutionary biology. Prehistoric humans didn't carry water bottles everywhere or drink constantly throughout the day. They drank when they were thirsty, typically from natural sources they encountered during their daily activities. Their bodies were adapted to handle periods between water consumption without performance decline. They also received significant water from the foods they ate. Fruits, vegetables, and animal tissues all contain substantial water that contributes to hydration. Modern hydration advice often suggests drinking before you're thirsty and consuming large amounts of water constantly. While dehydration is certainly detrimental to performance, overhydration is also problematic and more common than many people realize. Excessive water consumption dilutes electrolytes, particularly sodium, which is crucial for nerve signaling, muscle contraction, and fluid balance. Athletes drinking plain water excessively during long training sessions can develop hyponatremia, dangerously low sodium levels that impair performance and can be life threatening in extreme cases. Prehistoric humans maintained electrolyte balance through their whole food diet and occasional salt sources when available. Wild game, fish, and blood provided sodium and other minerals. Vegetables and fruits provided potassium and magnesium. They didn't lose massive amounts of electrolytes through air conditioned indoor training or consume pure water that dilutes their body's mineral balance. Their hydration and electrolyte intake were naturally balanced through food and appropriate water consumption. For modern peak performers, this suggests a more balanced approach to hydration. Drink according to thirst rather than forcing excessive water intake. Pay attention to urine color. Pale yellow indicates good hydration, while clear urine might suggest overhydration. During extended training sessions, especially in heat, consume electrolytes along with water through sports drinks, electrolyte tablets, or even just adding a pinch of salt to your water. Get minerals from whole foods, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, quality proteins rather than relying solely on supplementation. Sodium needs particular attention because modern processed foods are high in sodium while being nutritionally poor, leading to recommendations to limit salt intake. However, if you're eating primarily whole foods and training regularly with significant sweat losses, you may actually need more sodium than current guidelines suggest. Don't fear salt. Use high quality sea salt or Himalayan salt liberally on whole foods and ensure adequate sodium intake, particularly around training sessions. Prehistoric humans likely consumed significantly less sodium than modern processed food diets provide, but potentially more than very low salt whole food diets, especially after heavy physical activity. The ancestral principle is balance. Adequate hydration without overhydration, sufficient electrolytes to match losses and support physiological function, and primary reliance on the whole foods for minerals with strategic supplementation around training when needed. Listen to your body's thirst signals rather than following rigid hydration schedules. And pay attention to performance, recovery, and how you feel to adjust your approach accordingly. Supplements, ancient needs, modern solutions. Prehistoric humans didn't have supplement stores, yet they obtained comprehensive nutrition from their whole food diets. Does this mean modern supplements are unnecessary? Not quite. While whole foods should be the foundation, strategic supplementation can address gaps created by modern food production, lifestyle factors, and specific performance goals in ways that align with ancestral principles. First, recognize that even perfect whole food diets today may not match the nutrient density prehistoric humans obtained. Modern agricultural practices deplete soil minerals, reducing micronutrient content in plants. Farmed fish don't have the omega-3 content of wild fish. Conventional animal products don't match the nutritional profile of wild game. We're simply not getting the same nutritional bang for our buck that our ancestors did from their food sources, even when we're eating well. Several supplements make sense from an ancestral perspective. Vitamin D supplementation addresses the fact that most modern people spend far less time outdoors than prehistoric humans did, especially in winter or if you live far from the equator. Prehistoric humans maintained adequate vitamin D through sun exposure, but modern indoor lifestyles often create deficiency. Supplementing to maintain levels that prehistoric sun exposure would have provided, typically higher than current recommended minimums, supports bone health, immune function, and hormone production and mood. Omega-3 fatty acids from fish oil or algae address the reality that most people don't consume enough fatty fish to match the omega-3 intake prehistoric coastal populations achieved. Unless you're eating wild-caught fatty fish multiple times weekly, supplementation helps maintain the anti-inflammatory omega-3 to omega-6 balance that ancestral diets provided naturally. Choose high-quality fish oil tested for purity or algae-based omega-3s if you're vegetarian. Magnesium supplementation addresses widespread deficiency from soil depletion and the fact that modern stress increases magnesium demands beyond what diet provides. Prehistoric humans obtained abundant magnesium from wild plants and mineral-rich water sources. Modern humans often fall short despite eating vegetables because those vegetables aren't as magnesium-rich as wild plants were. Magnesium supports sleep, recovery, stress management, and hundreds of enzymatic reactions. Supplementing what diet doesn't provide adequately makes ancestral sense. Protein supplementation isn't necessary if you're eating adequate whole food protein, but it can be a convenient tool for meeting higher protein needs around training. Prehistoric humans didn't have protein powder, but they also didn't have the option to train intensely without immediately eating afterward. A post-workout protein shake simply provides quick amino acid delivery that supports recovery when whole food meals aren't immediately accessible. Choose high-quality sources away from grass-fed cows or plant-based options from pea, rice, or hemp protein. Creatine monohydrate is interesting because it's naturally present in meat, especially red meat. Prehistoric humans eating substantial amounts of wild game obtained significant creatine from diet. Modern humans eating less meat or plant-based diets may benefit from creatine supplementation to match the levels prehistoric meat consumption provided. Creatine supports strength, power, muscle growth, and even cognitive function with excellent safety profiles and extensive research support. What about the endless other supplements marketed for performance? Most lack either ancestral logic or strong evidence. Prehistoric humans thrived without pre-workouts, testosterone boosters, or exotic herbs. Focus supplementation on addressing genuine gaps or providing nutrients that ancestral diets included but modern diets often lack. Start with the basics: vitamin D, omega-3s, magnesium, adequate protein, and add only what your specific situation requires based on blood work, diet analysis, or clear performance needs. Injury prevention and recovery, ancient wisdom. Prehistoric humans faced constant risk of injury, yet they didn't have modern medicine, physical therapy, or rehabilitation protocols. How did they minimize injuries and recover effectively? Understanding their approaches provides valuable lessons for modern injury prevention and management. First, recognize that prehistoric movement patterns naturally prevented many modern injuries. Varied movement prevented overuse injuries. Constant mobility demands maintained joint health and tissue quality. Natural surfaces provided variable impact forces rather than the repetitive, identical impact of concrete or treadmills. Functional movement patterns developed balanced strength rather than the imbalances created by machine based isolation exercises. They weren't injury proof, broken bones, sprains, and wounds happened, but many common modern injuries simply didn't occur because their movement environment was fundamentally different. Modern injury prevention should prioritize movement quality and variety over volume. Many injuries result from doing too much of the same movement pattern without adequate recovery or from moving poorly due to mobility restrictions and movement dysfunction. Before adding training volume, ensure you're moving well through full ranges of motion without compensation patterns. Incorporate varied movement rather than excessive repetition of limited patterns. Build work capacity gradually rather than jumping into high volumes suddenly. These principles reflect how prehistoric humans developed physical capabilities safely through progressive exposure to varied demands. When injuries did occur, prehistoric humans recovered through rest, natural movement within pain free ranges, and gradual return to full activity. They didn't have the option to completely immobilize injuries for extended periods while remaining sedentary otherwise. Gentle movement that didn't aggravate injuries promoted blood flow and healing while maintaining overall fitness. This approach aligns well with modern evidence, showing that appropriate movement accelerates recovery better than complete rest for most injuries. The ancestral principle for injury management is active recovery within pain free ranges, not passive immobilization. If you're injured, maintain general fitness through movements that don't stress the injured area. If your shoulder is injured, train legs and core. If your knee is hurt, maintain upper body strength and work on mobility. Keep the injured area moving gently through whatever ranges don't increase pain or damage. This promotes healing while preventing the deconditioning that makes return to full activity more difficult and risky. Soft tissue work through self massage, foam rolling, or manual therapy addresses tissue quality in ways prehistoric humans might have achieved through natural surface contact, self manipulation, or social grooming behaviors. Dense connective tissue and muscle adhesions restrict movement quality and increase injury risk. Regular soft tissue maintenance keeps tissues pliable and responsive. This doesn't require expensive therapy. Simple self massage with hands, balls, or foam rollers addressing areas of restriction or discomfort maintains tissue quality effectively. Sleep and nutrition become even more critical during injury recovery. Prehistoric humans couldn't train through injuries using painkillers or ignore healing needs. They had to actually heal. Modern athletes often try to maintain training through injuries or return too quickly, prolonging recovery. Prioritize sleep, eat adequate protein and micronutrients to support tissue repair. Manage inflammation through whole foods and omega 3s, and give injuries genuine time to heal. Your prehistoric body knows how to heal. You just need to provide the conditions and not interfere with the process. The mindset of peak performance, prehistoric psychology. Peak performance isn't just physical, mindset and psychology are equally crucial. Prehistoric humans developed psychological characteristics that supported survival and thriving under challenging conditions. Understanding and cultivating these psychological traits can dramatically enhance modern performance. First, prehistoric humans had to maintain focus and presence in the moment. Distraction or mental wandering while hunting or gathering could be fatal. Modern life creates constant distraction through technology, multitasking, and information overload. Training your attention through practices like meditation, single tasking, and deliberately unplugging from technology develops the focused awareness that prehistoric life naturally required. This focused attention translates directly into better training quality, enhanced skill acquisition, and improved performance under pressure. Prehistoric humans also developed stress resilience through regular exposure to manageable challenges. They faced predators, weather extremes, food scarcity, and social conflicts, all requiring psychological resilience to navigate effectively. The key is that these challenges were manageable and often resolved relatively quickly. Modern psychological stress resilience comes from similar exposure to challenges that push your limits without overwhelming you, followed by recovery and integration of the experience. This is the value of deliberately seeking challenges in training and life, not to suffer, but to develop psychological strength through overcoming difficulty. Each time you complete a hard workout, push through discomfort, or accomplish something that seemed impossible, you're building the same resilience prehistoric humans developed through daily survival challenges. The key is progressive difficulty with adequate recovery, not constant, overwhelming stress. Prehistoric humans also had to maintain motivation without external reward systems or progress tracking. They couldn't check their fitness app or get social media validation. Their motivation came from intrinsic factors: the satisfaction of capability, the security of providing for family and group, the pride of skill mastery, the joy of movement itself. Modern motivation often depends too heavily on external validation, metrics, in comparison to others. Reconnecting with intrinsic motivation, enjoying the process, valuing capability for its own sake, focusing on personal progress rather than comparison, creates more sustainable, resilient drive. Purpose and contribution drove prehistoric humans powerfully. Everyone's capabilities mattered to group survival. Contributing to the group through your skills and efforts provided profound meaning. Modern life often disconnects individual effort from meaningful contribution, creating motivation problems even when external rewards are present. Finding ways to use your performance capabilities to contribute to others, teaching, helping, serving, inspiring, taps into the same purpose-driven motivation that powered prehistoric humans. Finally, prehistoric humans had to maintain psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, learn from failures, adjust strategies, and persist through setbacks. Rigid thinking or inability to adapt meant death. Modern peak performers need this same flexibility to navigate injury, plateaus, changing circumstances, and inevitable setbacks. Cultivating psychological flexibility through exposing yourself to new challenges, practicing adaptation, learning from failures rather than being destroyed by them, and maintaining perspective develops this crucial prehistoric mindset trait. Putting it all together, your ancestral performance blueprint. We've covered an enormous amount of ground, so let's synthesize everything into a practical blueprint you can actually implement. The goal isn't to recreate prehistoric life. It's neither possible nor desirable. The goal is to align modern life with evolutionary principles, where it matters for performance while taking advantage of modern knowledge and tools. Start with the fundamentals that have the biggest impact: sleep, nutrition, and movement. Prioritize 7 to 9 hours of sleep in a dark, cool room with consistent timing, aligned reasonably well with natural light cycles. Eat primarily whole, unprocessed foods, quality proteins, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, tubers, and healthy fats. Limit or eliminate processed foods, refined sugars, and seed oils. Find your optimal macronutrient balance based on your body type and activity level, understanding that this may take experimentation. Build metabolic flexibility through strategic meal timing rather than constant eating. For movement, establish a foundation of daily walking or other low-intensity activity. Aim for 8 to 12,000 steps or equivalent daily movement. Add strength training 3 to 5 days per week using compound movements that challenge your whole body. Include some high-intensity work weekly through sprints, intervals, or metabolic conditioning appropriate to your body type and recovery capacity. Incorporate movement variety through different activities, terrain, and patterns. Include genuine recovery days with light movement rather than complete inactivity. Manage stress actively rather than letting it accumulate. Practice daily stress discharge through physical activity, especially brief, intense movement followed by rest. Incorporate parasympathetic activation practices: deep breathing, meditation, time in nature, genuine relaxation. Maintain strong social connections through regular quality time with people you care about. Don't sacrifice relationships for performance, and they're fundamental to performance. Align with natural environmental rhythms. Get outside daily, especially in the morning, for light exposure. Minimize bright light exposure in the evening, particularly from screens. Spend time in natural environments regularly. Expose yourself to some temperature variation through outdoor activity or deliberate cold heat exposure. These environmental alignments create subtle but cumulative performance advantages. Tailor your approach to your genetic tendencies. If you're predominantly ectomorphic, focus on strength training with adequate calories and recovery, minimizing unnecessary conditioning work. If you're mesomorphic, leverage your versatility through progressive overload and varied training. If you're endomorphic, combine strength work with adequate activity volume to manage metabolism while building capability. Adjust macronutrient ratios and meal timing to work with your body rather than fighting it. Use supplementation strategically to address genuine gaps, vitamin D, omega 3s, magnesium at minimum, with protein and creatine if helpful for your situation. But remember that supplements supplement a solid foundation, they don't replace it. Prioritize whole foods, quality sleep, and intelligent training before worrying about advanced supplementation. Maintain injury prevention through movement quality, variety, and progressive overload rather than jumping into high volumes suddenly. If injuries occur, practice active recovery within pain free ranges while maintaining overall fitness. Prioritize healing rather than training through injuries with pharmaceutical masking. Cultivate psychological traits that support performance. Focused attention, stress resilience through progressive challenge, intrinsic motivation, purpose driven contribution, and psychological flexibility. These mindset factors often determine success more than physical capabilities alone. Finally, remember that this is a long term approach, not a quick fix. Prehistoric humans developed their capabilities over years of consistent lifestyle patterns, not through 6-week programs. Your transformation into a peak performer using ancestral principles will take time, patience, and consistency. Trust the process, make incremental progress, and let your biology respond to conditions it evolved to thrive in. The results will be more sustainable, comprehensive, and profound than any modern hack or shortcut could provide. Your journey forward, from understanding to action. We've reached the end of this exploration into ancestral approaches to peak performance, but this isn't really an ending, it's a beginning. Understanding these principles intellectually is valuable, but transformation only happens through application. So, where do you go from here? Start by assessing your current situation honestly. How does your lifestyle align with or diverge from the ancestral principles we've discussed? Where are the biggest gaps? Maybe you're sleeping poorly and constantly stressed. Maybe your diet is primarily processed foods. Maybe you're training hard, but without variety or adequate recovery. Maybe you're socially isolated or never spend time outdoors. Identify your biggest misalignments because those represent your biggest opportunities for improvement. Then prioritize ruthlessly. You can't change everything at once, and trying to will likely result in changing nothing permanently. Choose one or two areas where you can make meaningful changes immediately. Maybe that's improving sleep by getting outside in the morning and dimming lights at night. Maybe it's adding daily walking while cutting out processed foods. Maybe it's incorporating strength training while building social connection through a training partner or group. Pick changes that will have significant impact and that you can actually sustain. Make these changes non negotiable for 30 days, not as a temporary experiment, but as a trial period for a permanent shift. Prehistoric humans didn't do healthy behaviors sometimes, these were just how they lived. You need to develop the same consistency. 30 days is enough time to start seeing results and developing habits, but not so long that it feels overwhelming to commit to. Track how you feel, not just metrics. Yes, measure body composition, strength, performance if those matter to you, but pay attention to energy levels, sleep quality, mood, mental clarity, recovery, and overall sense of vitality. These subjective measures often change before objective metrics do, and they're what ultimately determine your quality of life and sustainable performance. After 30 days, assess honestly. Did the changes you made align you more closely with ancestral principles? Did they improve how you feel and perform? If yes, make them permanent and add another layer. Maybe you started with sleep and diet. Now add more sophisticated training. Maybe you started with basic movement. Now work on variety and intensity. Keep building alignment with evolutionary principles progressively, just as prehistoric humans developed capabilities progressively through consistent exposure to appropriate challenges. Remember that perfection isn't the goal, alignment is. You're not trying to live exactly like prehistoric humans. You're trying to create conditions in modern life that trigger the same biological responses that created peak performance in our ancestors. You're not abandoning modern advantages. You're combining ancient wisdom with modern knowledge and tools for results neither could achieve alone. This approach to peak performance isn't a trend or a hack. It's recognizing what has always worked for human performance because it's how our biology evolved. The principles we've discussed aren't new, they're ancient, tested across hundreds of thousands of years of human existence. They worked then, and they still work now because you're still fundamentally the same organism your prehistoric ancestors were. Your journey to peak performance through ancestral principles is uniquely yours. Your genetic background, current situation, goals, and preferences will determine exactly how you implement these ideas. But the underlying principles, movement variety, whole foods, adequate sleep, stress management, social connection, environmental alignment, working with rather than against your biology, these are universal human needs because they're evolutionary requirements for thriving. You have everything you need to begin this transformation today. You don't need special equipment, expensive programs, or perfect conditions. You need understanding, which you now have, and commitment to application, which only you can provide. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Trust your prehistoric biology to respond when you provide conditions it evolved to thrive in. This is episode 84 of the Peak Performance Podcast. I'm Brad Young, and I hope this exploration of ancestral approaches to peak performance has given you both understanding and inspiration. The path to your highest capabilities runs through your evolutionary past, not as a destination, but as a guide. Take what resonates, implement what works for you, and build your own version of peak performance grounded in principles that have guided human thriving for millennia. Until next time, train smart, live well, and honor the incredible capabilities your ancestors have given you.